Alrighty, we'll go ahead and get started. We're a little late today, but we do have more people on Zoom. Let me see. I did upload all of the outstanding lectures, so those should all be up now. I have the fun of being on an educational Zoom account or YouTube account. So I can only upload so many videos a day. So I had to sort of space them out over the weekend, but they should all be up now. We'll take a quick look at our syllabus because we are coming to the end and it's a little mind-boggling how little time we have left. Not to like panic anybody, just to sort of like muse about, whoa, it's gonna get real now. All right. So this week we're going to talk about learning disabilities and we'll probably do some assessment review. A week from today, you'll have a work day for your group project. Do plan to at least check in with me on that day. And then we'll start the group presentations and we do have I believe 3 of the groups have already signed up for a time. 2 of the groups have already signed up for a time. So other groups, make sure that you set up a meeting with me because when you do your required meeting with your outline, that's when you get to pick your date to present. So should be fairly chill. We do have group presentations the Monday of Thanksgiving week. But we have no class that Wednesday, so sort of heads up on that. And then, what will happen after the group presentations is I will distribute the final exam, and then it'll just be due to me basically like under my office door. I'll probably come in and sit in my office around 3 that day. So you can come and turn it in person if you'd like. Will just be your final due. So talking about the final actually made me remember the last time I taught this class and gave the in-person final before I moved to take-home exams, was the day that the big fish tank started leaking in Benton. I don't know if anyone was here for that. There were like waves going out. Students were showing me on their phone before the exam. I was like, oh, you know, always some excitement, right? I know that at least one group has gotten me their article already. That's fantastic. Encourage the other groups to start sending that along as well. So that what I'll do, they presented same day. Good question. Late work, all the late work is due by the 11th. So if you have outstanding SGAs, quizzes on Blackboard, anything like that, those will be due, and all that stuff can be turned in on Blackboard by 3 p.m. on the 11th. Yeah, no problem. Thanks for asking for the clarification. And so, you know, give yourself that time to catch up. In particular, if you haven't turned in the short paper, this time is much better than last time. Like at least half of you have turned it in. Last time, like no one did it till the end. Get that in because that's 50 points out of 500. So if you have a 0 on that, that's going to really yank down your score. All right, any questions about logistics for anything coming up? Cool. All righty, so today we'll sort of cover the learning disabilities in a little bit more detail. And then what I might do on Wednesday is bring in more of my assessment materials so y'all can see them. All right. Finding my links and videos link again. There we go. All right, last section. Also remember you get some freebies. I forget if it's 3 or 4 for the SGAs. So if you've done all of them to this point, you're obviously good to go. Alrighty, so we've talked a little bit about dyslexia in particular previously, but I want to make sure we cover the other learning disabilities as well. So the term learning disability is like an umbrella term for a wide variety of disorders. So when they first identified dyslexia, really interestingly, they were studying aphasia. They basically thought that the students who have what we would now call dyslexia had aphasia level language losses. And so they thought that's what's going on. That's what we need to figure out how to help them with. And then what they realized that it wasn't that severe, but it was enough to interfere with their learning, right? And ever since, what we've done is figure out ways to help folks who are dyslexic and struggle with other learning disabilities to like level the playing field in the classroom. So people that have accommodations, for example, might get extra time just because it will take them longer to read or write something out. They might get, I've had folks with learning disabilities have permission through the LRC to record my lectures with like either their phone or like a little mini recorder, just because that's easier for them to review like just the auditory rather than my videos. And, you know, there are a whole bunch of other things we can do to help folks who struggle with these learning disabilities, including specific tutoring, time management strategies, things along those lines. So you can have learning disabilities that are developmental. So that means essentially you acquired it either before or just after birth. It might be genetic, it might be due to some sort of issue you had either in utero or upon being born. Unfortunately, childbirth, even in our modern technological era, can still be pretty dangerous for both the mother and the soon-to-be infant. So stuff can happen. And then acquired dyslexia is where you've learned to read already, but then you get some sort of brain damage after you've learned to read. So it might be a TBI on the football field, or maybe you develop brain cancer, something along those lines. And in terms of the incidence of learning disabilities, it's about 10 to 15% of the school age population. My guess is that's an underestimate, because a lot of kids will kind of just assume they're not smart, which is really, really sad to me, right? And they won't ever report it to anybody. They won't get help, right? And so my guess is that's probably a little higher than that. There are some issues with assessment of learning disabilities. So typically, in order to be classified as having, in particular, a specific learning disability, you have to be 2 years behind in your, like, let's say you have dyslexia. You have to be like 2 years behind your supposed like reading level that you should be at. More disabilities are therefore found in older children, right? Because if you're in kindergarten, how do you judge if the kid is 2 years behind? And it also means that the kid has to really be struggling, right? I mean, if you get even like a month behind sometimes, right, it's overwhelming, right? So I can't even imagine being 2 years behind and then be like, okay, now we'll help you. Also, the tests that are given, like achievement tests, can vary dramatically from school to school. I've been talking about this in my assessment course, that there are so many different ones, and it's even questionable what they're measuring at times. And so if that's what you're using to determine if they're 2 years behind, that can certainly be an issue. So that was just like a very brief video, just talking about learning disabilities overall. I'm going to show here.
So, what are learning disabilities? Well, the term learning disabilities is kind of like a blanket because it covers a number of different disorders. Learning disabilities affect how a person takes in verbal or nonverbal information, how they sort, organize, and retrieve that information, their ability to remember it, and even their level of understanding. People who have a learning disability can struggle with spoken language, listening, speaking, and understanding. Reading and writing can be a challenge, and math can be a real hard stone to move. And just like how people's taste in fashion can range from socks and sandals to high fashion on the catwalk, learning disabilities can also range in their severity and how they affect people. Many people with learning disabilities are very intelligent, even gifted. With the right help, they're able to learn just as well as anyone. The alarm bells ring and the red flag is raised that someone might have a learning disability if they need an unusual amount of effort and help to be successful, or if they are unexpectedly underachieving at school or work. The impact of having a learning disability and the challenges that often come along for the ride, including attention, organization, social skills, anxiety, and others, can change as a person goes through life. From school to home to soccer practice, every person with learning disabilities is unique and remains unique as they travel through life.
So what I'm Googling on my phone is the fact that I was pretty sure that this was part of general lore about Einstein, and it is that some people think that Einstein had some sort of learning difference or learning disability. And so what I'm doing is looking up what that might have been. So according to, again, these stories, he failed to talk until age 4, resulting from a language disability. It was also claimed he couldn't read until age 9. People say he failed his first attempt at entrance into college and lost 3 teaching positions in 2 years. But according to this widely believed notion, is false. Um, although Einstein's family had initial apprehensions that he might be backward, quote unquote, because of the unusually long time before he began to talk. So that was true. He was speaking in whole sentences by some point between the ages of 2 and 3. So like he may have been a little bit delayed, but you know, was obviously fine. So when he was 2.5 years old, his mom had another baby, a sister. And he, like in his little 2.5-year-old mind, he thought that a baby meant a toy. And so apparently he asked, "Where are the wheels?" Which is just like adorable, right? Endearing. He was withdrawn, and so they think that that is what have led to some of his language delay. He was just a really shy kid. He did really well in school, perhaps not surprisingly. He was accepted to a competitive school that was hard to get in. At the age of 12, he was reading physics books. At the age of 13, he was reading The Critique of Pure Reason. He said Kant was his favorite author. You go, little pretentious child. He did not actually pass his college exam the first time he took it. But he took it at age 16 and didn't study for it. So, okay. He did have difficulty finding a post, but that wasn't because of his learning differences. He was an independent, intellectually rebellious person. He was a pariah on the academic community. One professor told him, "You have one fault. One can't tell you anything." He was in a bunch of temporary jobs. One of the other links I saw did suggest that he may have been on the autism spectrum. Be classified as what we would now refer to as high functioning autism, but you know, a few years ago may have been referred to as autism or Asperger's syndrome, which would lead to the social awkwardness. Anecdotal evidence suggests he had difficulty communicating clearly and delivered notoriously confusing lectures. He also had obsessive single-minded interests. Individuals with autism also have the genes for grasping complex systems, including math, music, physics, and computer program. He may have suffered from dyscalculia, although that other article didn't say anything about that. So, again, sort of, I don't know, like lore, mythology about Einstein, but that there might have been something going on. And again, we didn't have the same diagnosis that we have today, right? Like there are a lot of people who say like, "Oh, autism didn't exist when I was growing up." And it was like, maybe it wasn't called that, but there was probably some eccentric kid you knew who was like obsessed with space and nothing else. And that's all they talk about, right? And today we might test them and find out they're on the spectrum. So reading disabilities, dyslexia is probably one of the more commonly known and understood reading differences or learning differences. So one of the things that can happen is issues with phonological reading. So this is probably way before y'all's time, but when I was growing up, there was like a system they would advertise on TV called Hooked on Phonics. It'd be like, "Hooked on Phonics worked for me." But it was just basically teaching kids to read by sounding words out, which a lot of places do anyway, right? And there are some people that have impairments or deficiencies in their phonological awareness, and that can interfere with their ability to learn to read or to read well. You can also have folks who just memorize the words. This is called graphemic reading. And we all have words we do this with, right? So common words like the, to, they're sometimes called sight words because we don't need to sound them out. We just learn them pretty intuitively, right? And so We know that those are issues. And I found this video, I want to say it's like BuzzFeed or someone like them. And I thought it was just kind of lovely, in that it talked about what it's like to live as someone with dyslexia and the things that people say to them. So we think about like lived experience and how it affects people. And like this will probably boggle some of your minds, like the wildly inappropriate things people have said to folks with dyslexia. So.
Yes.
Oh,
You just need to focus.
I'm a bit dyslexic too.
You're slow, aren't you?
Can you spell dyslexia?
D-Y-S Lexia.
You must hate reading.
Obviously I do.
See, I'm the complete opposite. I love reading.
It takes me ages and ages to read books.
I'm 21, I've read one book in my life.
So I didn't read till I was 12 and then I read a book a day.
It's a glitch, because when I read, I sometimes read and I follow the sentence down and then I go back up.
I would end up reading the exact same line over and over.
The words when I used to read used to move around and just get crazy.
I get extra letters and letters going.
Mixed rounds,
Yeah, they just, you know, they're just funky, and sometimes like, hey, I'm gonna go over here, and it's like, you're not meant to go there.
Have you tried spell check?
Yes.
I was literally about to say spell check is my best friend.
Spell check is useless, because if you can't spell the word in the first place, you don't know whether it's correcting it to be right or wrong.
After you do like an essay or something like that, you can just press one button and you'd be like, yeah, that's what I meant. That's what I meant. That's what I meant.
Social media is the worst. I have to get 3 people to check anything I post just in case I put something really rude.
I hate it at the same time. Did you mean this? You condescending little prick. But yes, please, thank you, thank you.
You just need to focus.
So I've had that all my life. You need to focus, you need to focus. You're not focusing, you need to try harder.
My parents, my teachers thought I had attitude problems.
I'm lazy.
To people,
According to my mum, I'm lazy.
lazy gang.
And they just thought I was rude, as opposed to thinking that I couldn't engage with what was happening.
Put post-it notes around your room, like do a mind map, use different colours. That never used to work for me.
Because everyone is different. Everyone should, in my opinion, learn in a different way or at a different speed.
I enjoy going at my own pace. You know, I'm not lazy. I just like going things at my own pace. You know?
To all of those people, yeah.
Oh, it's not fair that you get longer on exams.
I would swap it in a heartbeat, though, to not have dyslexia.
I've had people say, well, you shouldn't get extra time in exams because you don't have extra time in life.
You could give me the whole night and I'm still not going to finish it.
I basically wouldn't have any qualifications if I didn't have extra time.
If you've got a additional educational need and you read a bit slower, you need to be given that time to process.
Everything that was going on in my head, I wanted to put it on the piece of paper, but I couldn't read fast enough and I just couldn't write fast enough. And it just used to make me panic and I used to have the worst anxiety attacks.
Oh, I'm a bit dyslexic too.
A bit, a smidge.
Oh, I'm dyslexic too. I think it's kind of like condescending sometimes, because I think sometimes people are actually faking it.
They don't get what dyslexia means, so it's kind of their own ignorance.
It's just the ambiguity of it. It's like, if you're bad at reading or you don't like reading or like say you got ADHD or I think there's loads of things that you could mistake for it.
The people who are actually genuinely dyslexic, it's incredibly frustrating and
Really patronising.
Yeah, really patronising.
I've had people say this to me and I kind of feel like they're trying to belittle.
Who I am.
Yeah.
Any true dyslexic wouldn't go, I'm a dyslexic as well. You try and hide it the best you can.
Yeah.
As soon as someone finds you out, you just go, yeah, I am. And you instantly become very aggressive towards them.
And
Yeah,
what?
and what? Come on then.
Okay, you're just a bit thick.
Cold world.
Stupid, bit of an idiot.
Slow, I've been called an idiot, I've been called weird.
Waste of space.
Well, maybe dyslexic people are stupid, but by someone else's standard.
Yes, it's important to talk about diversity as race and gender and all those different things, but there's also diversity in how people learn.
If you're trying to take a super fast test and you're dyslexic, then yeah, you're fucking stupid.
You'll never amount to anything.
So I've just graduated in nutritional science.
I'm doing a master's in molecular biophysics.
I'm an officer in the Merchant Navy.
And they were all like, yeah, she's not going to do anything, she's got loads of negativity, she's not trying.
It was almost something that I said to myself in sixth form as well, and I think that's the worst thing. I started believing it.
It's about perseverance.
Yeah, no, definitely.
Key motto in life.
And I'll just share it. So one of my best friends in undergrad was our salutatorian, so second highest GPA of the folks graduating. And she was a double major in Chem and International Studies, and she had just pretty severe dyslexia. And so she had to study a lot more hours than we did, for example. And now is, I call her doctor, double doctor. She's got a PhD and an MD and is an emergency room physician. So yeah, the whole idea that like you might not, you won't, you know, nothing will come of you, right? You can't succeed is hogwash.
Don't worry, you'll grow out of it.
You will learn to cope. Is probably like.
I didn't grow out of it. I would say I grew into it.
You know, it's taken me so long and all my life of being crap. And then now I'm like, actually, I have a reason and I know why it is. And this is my reason. I'm not being stupid.
I probably wouldn't have learned that I was really creative and that I could do something with that.
I wouldn't be me, and I wouldn't have like some of the amazing ideas that I have without thinking in the way that I think.
Do the stand up and say, I'm Declan and I'm dyslexic.
I'm Priya and I'm dyslexic.
Yeah, that's it. It's just crack on with it. Don't struggle on your own. It's not worth it. It really isn't.
Yeah, just own it.
So again, I just really loved that because the stuff that people say to them is horrifying, obviously, but I also believe it, right? Just having heard people make other comments in passing. So you can also have, obviously, attentional deficiencies, where your attention cannot easily be shifted. And they think that this is linked to the problems with the association areas of the parietal lobe. And so when that is extreme enough to be a diagnosis, then it's attention deficit hyperactivity disorder or ADHD. And there are various subtypes of ADHD. So we think of it in terms of the hyperactivity, right? We think of it as kiddos bouncing off the walls and things along those lines. But in fact, there can also be the inattentive type, which is where you're more daydreamy, having a hard time focusing in class, things along those lines. I think just based on like what I know about gender socialization, we see that the inattentive type more in girls. And I think it's like because of what's socially acceptable for girls versus boys to do, right? Like it's considered more socially acceptable for little boys to act out, right? Whereas little girls are expected still to this day in 2023, right, to be quiet and things along those lines. So they'll often get missed and not get the help they need because it's not disruptive to the other kiddos in class. Once upon a time, this was referred to as hyperactive child syndrome. Love that. So they will sometimes have behavioral issues, and sometimes ADHD can be paired with other diagnoses. So it's not super unusual to have ADHD and a learning disability, or to even have ADHD and be on the autism spectrum. And in fact, a lot of folks are now sort of putting ADHD under the umbrella of neurodiversity. That it's entirely possible that people with ADHD are just thinking in different ways than neurotypical people do, essentially. So we see deficits in sustained attention, sometimes impulsive behaviors, sometimes the hyperactivity, and in order to be diagnosed, it has to be in more than one setting. So it can't just be at school, it'd have to be like school and soccer practice or school and home, things along those lines. And this is the most common behavioral disturbance among kids, period. And in terms of what causes it, we don't necessarily have like one good explanation. Some people suggest it's genetics. Some people suggest it might be linked to some sort of brain damage, or like encephalitis. There are people who've tried to link it to food allergies or other environmental things like lead contamination. We don't have one answer, and my guess is there isn't going to be one answer, that in fact ADHD probably has multiple potential causes. In terms of treatment, we have really good therapies for folks with ADHD. They are often based on sort of like a reward system. It can work really well for kiddos. Also becomes very important, particularly if the ADHD is fairly severe, to have some sort of pharmacological intervention. Typically, these are stimulant medications like Ritalin. They work to stimulate the prefrontal cortex, which has been shown to be less active in folks with ADHD. So basically, it's like they turn back on the inhibition, they turn back on the executive function, help these folks pay attention, not just get up out of their seat when they're not supposed to, right? Things along those lines. For some kiddos, certain dietary supplements or changes seem to help. To me, that says that like that's a different underlying issue than some of the other kiddos, right? Because that's not going to work for everybody. And I have a couple clips from Super Nanny where we have a kiddo with ADHD that she was working with.
Some people just know there's a podcast about that.
Are you listening to a podcast?
Yeah, but it's about multitasking, which I'm trying to do. I get you in one ear and...
Maybe I should do a podcast.
Those are the people who know you're in good hands with Allstate.
No. Later on in the day, the kids jumped back into the pool again, didn't ask permission again, and Mum couldn't do anything to stop it. Get out. Kyle!
When Farley was running around the pool and hopping over the fence, I mean, it gets to the point where I just start laughing because I can't believe I'm really chasing a 4-year-old around and she's actually beating me. Get out.
I will by myself, okay?
Don't tell lies. Get out. Farley, it's freezing. It's freezing. They've got these young children at the age of 4 and 6 who are not prepared to listen to their own parents. And if they can't get a grip on this now, they're going to be in huge trouble. Huge trouble. You're done. Kyle! Wait till your dad gets here.
Kyle and Farley were either hitting their mum or ignoring their mum, and I knew that she couldn't wait for the reinforcement to get home.
Michael, you can go handle. I can't deal anymore.
Did Mommy tell you to get out of the phone?
Hi, please to
Get out
meet
of
you.
the car? Hi, I'm Michael.
Hi, Joe.
Nice
Hi,
to meet
Michael.
you. Farley, come here.
Dad did manage to get the kids out of the pool, but he did proceed to give them a timeout. And first it was Farley, and then Kyle.
I'm right here, Kyle. No reason to open the door.
So what's your take on his ADHD? Because I know he's not on medication at the moment.
No, he's not. He
So
just
he has
chooses
to-
not to listen. Kyle, stop it. Stop. Kyle wants to just push my buttons. Now I'm getting pretty mad right now.
Just like a side note, like the idea that like the kid just chooses not to listen is fairly common among folks who don't want their kid to have an ADHD diagnosis, folks who are worried about the medications, things along those lines. But people who have ADHD, it is a neurological difference, right?
Dad got really frustrated and he made the situation worse because the more angrier he became, the more aggressive Kyle's behaviour was.
So what measures have you taken to deal with his ADHD as you've decided, the pair of you, not to put him on medication?
Just tried to get a little bit more structured with him as much as we can.
Yeah.
Joe asked me about Kyle's ADHD, and I didn't know how to answer her question because I guess I don't know how to deal with it myself. My fear is, as he's already gotten kicked out of kindergarten, if they remove him from school to another type of program, that's just my worst nightmare. And I kind of see that it's going that direction.
If these parents are going to make a choice to take Carl off of his medication when he's been diagnosed with ADHD, then they've got to come up with some more positive methods to help him, because it's not going to go away on its own.
You're sitting here.
Yes.
Look at my face. Do you understand?
Yes.
I'm getting upset. So look at me.
Once Michael left, I went into Carl's bedroom so that I could talk to him myself.
When Mummy and Daddy shout at you and they get cross with you, does it make you feel sad or happy?
Sad.
You feel sad. Do you want to behave badly? If I stayed for a couple of days, would that be a good thing to help you? Because can I tell you something? I don't think you're a bad boy. I don't think you're a bad boy at all.
If they don't listen, I can force them.
With the kids in the pool and a nanny not in control, I started to get worried.
And so here is another video.
Virginia Republicans are hiding their true agenda on abortion because they know they're too extreme for Virginia.
Children who do have ADHD need a lot of consistent motivation, so a reward system in place really does help, and that's why I introduced the Waterworks system to give Carl some self-esteem and boost his confidence. These cups, all right, have different things on them. This one has a good report from Alejandra. The next one is homework. Now, this is what happens. When you do it, and you do it very well, you get the chance to open it up and fill it up with water to this ridge. Okay?
And then what?
And then when you've achieved that, you then get to pour the water into the tube. Now, if you do all of this, that ball at the bottom will start to float and rise right the way to the top. This is your tub.
Awesome.
When Kyle saw the waterworks, he was pretty excited. His eyes lit up. So I think he's going to be led in a positive direction of feeling better about himself.
And I love this because it's not like giving the kid candy, right? You're not paying the kid. You're giving the kid something that is involving him intellectually. I mean, it's science, right? But the kid is just like excited about it, so it will be reinforcing.
Give me 5. You got it. You got it, buddy. You got it. Carl was excited about earning his first reward, so he sat down to do some homework whilst I went through some tips. Find a quiet spot. Okay. It's a quiet spot. Only present one assignment at a time. Which one are you going to do first? You decide.
Mugs or this one?
Oh, this one.
Okay.
That one. Okay. Explain the instructions slowly and carefully, and when he's doing well, praise the effort that he's making.
The tools for homework were great. It's something that I've never thought of. The simple things that would really help a kid. Kyle.
Look how smart he is.
And like that whole idea of like finding a quiet space, that is something we would tell adults that we diagnose with ADHD as well. It's like, especially we worked with a lot of college students. You all are familiar, your dorm room isn't always the greatest for studying, particularly if you have a roommate, right? You know, if you've got TV going, whatever else is going on, there's noise on your hallway, right? So figuring out like, are there ideal times you could study in your room? Do you need to go to the library, right? Like just figuring out what works for you.
How did you do these blocks? How did you do these blocks? Okay, so the kangaroo's on 2 and we took 1 away? What do we have left?
1.
This is too easy.
This is so
write it
easy.
in here. Write it in here.
Carl did really good with his homework, but after 20 minutes, he started to wobble with his focus.
Backwards. Do it again.
Oh, Mom, what? I can't do it backwards.
I was a little apprehensive about Kyle and his homework because usually he, you know, gets really distracted and decides he's not going to do it. I wasn't sure what was going to happen.
I can't do all writing.
You got like 2, 3 more.
I'm so sweaty.
It was fantastic to see Heather just stay put with Kyle and keep him focused. And he went off a little bit and she brought him back again.
Hey, you just had one little mistake. It's not the end of the world. There you
We
go.
can.
High five.
Well done, Carl.
The homework that he ended up doing, and it took us a half hour. It would take us normally 2 hours to complete.
3 pieces of homework in 30 minutes. The children with ADHD suffer from a lot of low self-esteem. So giving Carl a reward system that would motivate him would make him very pleased, and adding an additional sticker book would make him smile. Carl's homework achievement book. Choose one of these stickers and you will place it into your book here every time you achieve your homework.
When I do my homework, I get to put a sticker on my sticker book. My shark!
Homework? Isn't that on your waterworks?
Yes.
With real positive support from his parents, a sticker book, the waterworks system in place, it's really going to give Carl the self-esteem and confidence he's going to need to focus on his school homework.
High five.
And then Carl becomes...
And so then a lot of what she's doing there is essentially behavioral therapy, right? A lot of behavioral therapy, especially for kiddos, is just creating new habits, enforcing those new habits, and then exactly what she was doing, working with the parents, right? A lot of times when you're doing therapy for kiddos, who you really need to work with is the parents. I have only worked a little bit with kids. My PhD's in adult psychopathology, but I was friends with some of our developmental psychopathology folks, child psychology folks, and like there are whole therapies that are just dedicated to the parents, basically. There's one called Triple P, so it's like the positive parenting program. Even therapies for kids, you often have a parent component of it so that they can reinforce what the child is doing. And then like one of the few examples of when I have worked with kiddos was when I was on my residency, we all got to rotate through the ADHD group. So we would have 6 or 7 kids with ADHD after school when all their meds were off. Fun challenge. But luckily we always had our one child person who was on residing with us, who was really great with the kiddos and supported us. And what we did with them was a socialization class, and they just called it like friendship class. And the kids would play games and practice taking turns and things like that. And basically that was good for the kids, but we were sort of structured childcare while the parents did the real therapy next door with our supervisor. He was training them on how do you work with kids with ADHD. And he was great. You know, these kids were kids, right? And they're kids who are neurodivergent, so they struggle sometimes. So I wasn't in at this point, but one of my friends said there was a kid who got under the table and started yelling he was going to kill himself. The kid was like 7. And so they went and got the supervisor, and he just came in and looked at him and said, "No, you're not." And the kid got up and just sat back down at the table like nothing happened. So, the one that I remember very vividly is we had a little girl who, one of the things we did is at the end of the parent class, they would come in and the kids would tell them what they learned about that day. And we would practice this, right? Because little kids in general aren't necessarily going to remember things, but especially, again, kids with attention deficits who their meds have worn off by that time, right? And this one little girl was clearly just wanting to be funny. I think she was like a little comedian in training. And so one week when they came in, they said, "What'd you learn?" And she said, "I like chicken." Like, okay, but what did you learn? And then the very next week, when our supervisor asked her, "Well, what did you learn this week?" She said, "How to be bad." And he said, "No, he didn't. Think about it again. We'll come back around to you." So he was just always like really calm with them. So again, I am definitely not a child psychopathologist, but I have done a lot of the evals for these in adults, and know that, you know, it can really make them struggle as well, obviously. Yeah, Sam. Good question. Yeah, so by the time people are adults, they usually have figured out ways of coping, especially if they've never been diagnosed. And it's really interesting because a lot of times it is like stimulant related. So not all, but some adults with ADHD, I know they have to go take an exam, they go smoke beforehand. And tobacco is a stimulant. Or they'll just have figured out sort of hacks for themselves for studying. But yeah, in adults, same thing. We would want to explain to them, train them on like, here's how to go about doing your homework. Here's how about, and again, we have a lot of college students, so it's slightly different than someone who is like out in the working world, right? But memory aids, like setting alarms on your phone, a reminder to take medications, things along those lines. So I guess the only difference really is like the adults have a little more agency, right? So you wouldn't have to work with the parents to do those things, right? They could do it themselves. Yeah, and then, I mean, it was so interesting because some of the folks were trying to get accommodations for the first time. And that certainly happens with my students here too, right? Where they've just walked their way through high school, right? And then like, no, I don't need accommodation. I don't need accommodations. They get to college and it's more of a struggle, right? And it's so sad to me because this is the way our society teaches people, right? Our society has told people that getting accommodations is not acceptable, right? That why do you get more time at exams, right? It's like in that, and that they feel like it's unfair. And like what I tried to explain to them is like, no, you're just leveling the playing field. Now it's as if you were someone who's not neurodivergent taking the exam, right? When you get extra time. But there is this sort of like very Western, very American, like, no, you should do everything on your own. And it's the same thing we get for like depression and anxiety, right? Like, don't take medication, do it on your own, go exercise, that'll make everything better. It's like, it might make it better, but it won't fully get you to where you need to be, right? Yeah, Julia.
I know I had a bodily board for second grade surgery, so I had time problems. And the high school I went to would not honor it. And so they were a private Catholic high school.
So they didn't have to.
So they were just like, yeah, no, like we don't believe in it. So I did fine without it, obviously. I don't think I used it here anymore. But it was just the fact that they were like, no, we don't honor that. Like you can't come here if you want to use that. So,
Yeah, it's so interesting, like the religious exemption thing.
it was just weird.
Yeah, because, if that happened in public school, it'd be illegal, right? But yeah, even when we looked at daycares for my kiddo, like some of the ones with religious exemptions, like didn't have CPS come through and things like that. And like, you just sort of have to weigh the pros and cons of that, right? But yeah, I'm sorry that happened to you. I'm glad it was obviously turned out okay, but that's frustrating. Let's see. So we got a couple things in the chat here. So let me scroll on up. Reminds me of me and my siblings as someone with ADHD and a partner with ADHD. It's actually more difficult for us to interact with them due to their combatants of their ADHD and ours. Yeah, because of the stimulation differences. Yeah, I think that really makes a difference because again, not everyone's ADHD is going to be exactly the same, right? Not everyone's ADHD is going to manifest as sort of impulsivity versus inattentiveness. And so even people with ADHD sometimes don't quite share the experiences. I also think that like, it's really interesting because again, area of TikTok/Instagram that I might just fall into because of my psychology background, but there were a whole lot of people I was seeing who were talking about like figuring out they had ADHD as an adult. And like, I'm certain some of them did and just were never diagnosed, right? But it also made me wonder of like, is there something else you're struggling with, but ADHD is just the easiest to label, right? And so, yeah, typically in order to get like a 504 or an IEP, like Julia was talking about, you do need to be like officially diagnosed. And that would be by like a school psychologist, a neuropsychologist, neurologist, somewhere along those lines. But so many people were not. I was amazed. I think I mentioned this at the beginning of the semester. I was amazed with people who would say, oh yeah, they gave me like a questionnaire front and back when I was 7, and then they said I had ADHD based on that. And it was like, no, that's not how we officially diagnose it. Okay. So like one of our former adjuncts, she ended up just not having as much time as she thought she did. Peg Jensen. She runs a private practice where she does mostly assessments, and she's actually rents space from Chesapeake Bay Academy, and not surprisingly, a lot of their kids are her clients, right? And like when she does one of these assessments, it's an all-day thing. Like she does the morning, everybody takes a lunch break, and then they come back in, right? So like the idea that people are getting diagnosed with just like one piece of paper is really scary to me as someone who has done these and sees the attentiveness we should be giving to them. That might be a nice way to put it. Let's see, we also see folks with sensory deficiencies. So people with reading disabilities, for example, might need a longer interval between 2 tones being played to discriminate them. And you can actually do some training to make that better. We also might see some motor deficiencies. So the cerebellum controls movement, timing, and coordination. It seems like that might be implicated in ADHD, some learning differences. And it seems like if we're going back to even just like dyslexia, right, which we think it's dyslexia, but subpopulations of people who struggle with reading display different deficits. But the major causes do seem to lie in language processing and other areas contribute. So some of the other things that can happen include more severe things. So for example, cerebral palsy. The primary characteristic of this is motor abnormalities, but there can also be cognitive impairments. It occurs in about 6 per 1,000 births, which is actually a fairly high incidence rate. And what we'll see is that even kids who probably need it, who have cerebral palsy, only about 10% of them will get no special services. 65% will get like occasional services, and only 25% will probably get what they actually need. We see different types of motor symptoms. It's associated with premature birth, asphyxia, either during the labor process or sometime later, and difficult to labor as well. There are difficulties and abnormalities in the basal ganglia, the brainstem, and the cerebellum. So those are just some of the examples with cerebral palsy. Hydrocephalus is another thing where you have an increased volume of cerebrospinal fluid. And it results from a couple different things. So sometimes you have obstruction of flow of that cerebrospinal fluid, so then it just builds up. They think that some kids might get just like overproduce the cerebrospinal fluid. And sometimes there's shrinking of brain tissue around the ventricles. The ventricles are those dark fluid-filled spaces everyone has in their brains. And so I actually did a white paper about this when I was in my grad school neuropsychology course. So in terms of epidemiology, unfortunately, hydrocephalus is relatively common in stillbirth, newborn, and early infancy. The incident for quote unquote uncomplicated congenital hydrocephalus is about 1 in 1,000. The incidence when complicating spina bifida is also 1 in 1,000 in the US, but is more in the British Isles, 4 in 1,000. So that speaks again that it might be genetic, but it can also be acquired around the time of birth, as I mentioned, some sort of injury or asphyxia during labor. In terms of clinical presentation, in infants, we see irritability, not eating, throwing up what they do eat, not gaining weight, although that can be not as obvious because they are retaining the cerebral spinal fluid and they can look like they're gaining weight because their head is gaining weight, basically. If their head circumference is more than 2 standard deviation among the mean, that might be what's happening. Another thing that can happen is what they call the setting sun sign. So if you sort of pull up their eyelid, their eye won't also go up. So then it looks like their eye is sort of setting, like the sun below their lower lid. Sometimes they will have sluggish reactions to light or no visual response, so they have some visual failure. In kids older than infants, we see a large head, headaches, again, that vomiting, failure to eat. They're not making progress in school. You'll see changes in behavior. Sometimes it's linked to seizures as well, migraine pain, and for whatever reason, an increased incidence of left-handedness is associated with hydrocephalus. You see motor problems, general delay and failure to make appropriate visual or social contact. And there may be a history of relative normality followed by increasing concern about development. If adults get hydrocephalus, again, this will be due to some sort of injury typically. They have a recurring and increasingly unremitting headache, coughing, sneezing, hard to pass stool, nausea, vomiting, disturbance of gaze, confused states. And if it goes on without being treated, they can develop symptoms of dementia, essentially. So what they find is that infants and small children have general delays, sort of a global cognitive deficit, and up to 60% of them have motor deficits where they attempt to do movements, but they're poorly performed. Kids who are a little older normally have a normal IQ, at least the full scale, but their verbal IQ is better than their nonverbal IQ. And then in terms of how they treat it, they typically put in what's called a shunt. It's a tube that drains the excess fluid, basically. And with shunting, they can often develop normal intellect. But if you don't shunt and you don't recognize it, it can lead to severe dementia. In adults, you'll see progressive deterioration of intellect and behavior, loss of insight into their own decline, problems with memory, so like not being able to make new memories, not a great short-term memory, things along those lines. So to diagnose it, you can do it prenatally via ultrasound. And at that point, depending on the severity, the parents may choose to terminate the pregnancy. It can require repeat scans to actually diagnose it. In adults, you would diagnose with a CT and an MRI. And as I mentioned, you treat it with the shunting. However, you have to be careful because shunting, you now have essentially an open spigot. That's not quite the right word, but you know what I mean. An open access point to your brain, right? So if you get infected in there, it's really not good. Brain infections are not good, right? You can get blockage, disconnection, the tubing can move around. Alternative treatments can include wrapping the head in a compressive bandage. There are medications you can give, or sometimes they will get out the excess fluid through a lumbar puncture. In terms of pathology, basically, they're just making too much cerebral spinal fluid. And it can cause brain atrophy, particularly in adults, because your skull cannot expand. So just like how Gabby Douglas's brain was swelling after the injury and they actually had to remove part of her skull, same type of thing, it can cause that type of damage. Neuroimaging will reveal large, dark, fluid-filled spaces, but also atrophy in the brain due to the essentially displacement by that swelling of the ventricle or the vesicles and pressure on other areas of the brain. You want to make sure you're ruling out other things that might cause it, and neuroimaging is the best way to do differential diagnosis. Alrighty, let me see. I'm gonna talk about autism spectrum disorder, and I feel like I have enough on that that'll be good to wait for that for Wednesday, so we'll end a little bit early here. I would normally give this time to groups to work on stuff, but none of you have your full group here. So you could just take these 15 minutes for yourself. And then on Wednesday, we'll talk about autism spectrum disorders, and I'll bring in a couple different assessment instruments for us to look at.
Professor? I have a quick question. Okay, can you hear me? So sorry.
And the echo's gone, so you're good.
Yeah, okay. So I had a question about the IRB, the introduction method. So I was like, do you have like a previous one, or is that on your like link on the BEC? Like, is there like a previous one that I could go off of?
Good question. Shoot me an email. I don't know if I gave you guys access to other ones to look at. Shoot me an email and I'll send a couple links that you can look at.
Awesome, thank you so much.
You're welcome. All right, anybody else have questions, or are you guys good? All right, I'm gonna shut off the Zoom.